The morning started like any other Tuesday. I arrived at the office with my usual coffee, greeted the security guard, and took the elevator to the 14th floor. I'd been working at Meridian Consulting for almost 7 years, slowly climbing from junior analyst to department head. The company had grown from a small outfit of 20 people to over 300 employees across 3 cities. I was proud of my contribution to that growth. As I settled at my desk, an email notification popped up. Meeting with Sandra and HR at 11 a.m. Sandra was our COO, someone I rarely interacted with directly. A meeting with her and HR could only mean one thing: something significant was happening. My stomach tightened. The 2 hours before the meeting dragged painfully. I tried focusing on the quarterly report I was finalizing, but my thoughts kept drifting to the mysterious meeting. When my phone buzzed with a reminder, I closed my laptop, straightened my blazer, and walked to the conference room with a practiced confidence I wasn't feeling inside. Sandra was already there, along with Mitch from HR. The room felt uncomfortably cold. "James, thank you for coming," Sandra began, her voice carrying that artificial warmth executives perfect over years of delivering difficult news. "We wanted to speak with you directly about some organizational changes that are coming." I nodded, waiting for her to continue. "As you know, Meridian is restructuring to better position ourselves in the market. We've been reviewing all departments, and we've made some difficult decisions." Her eyes flickered to Mitch, who slid a folder across the table toward me. "We're consolidating the analytics and research departments under one leadership. After careful consideration, we've decided that Morgan will be heading the new combined division." Morgan, my colleague, my friend. Someone I had personally mentored when they joined the company 4 years ago. "Your position as head of analytics will be phased out over the next 30 days. We value your contributions, James, and we'd like to offer you a senior analyst role in the new structure," reporting to Morgan. A demotion. A humiliating step backward that would put me under the supervision of someone who had learned the ropes from me. The room suddenly felt airless. "This isn't a reflection of your performance," Mitch jumped in, clearly reciting from the HR script. "It's strictly an organizational decision." I maintained my composure, asking practical questions about the transition while my inner voice screamed. After 20 minutes of details about severance options and the new reporting structure, I stood up, thanked them both professionally, and walked back to my office. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I forwarded the meeting notes to my personal email, gathered a few personal items, and told my team I'd see them tomorrow. Nobody knew yet. That would come in the morning announcement. I drove home in silence. No radio, no calls, just the sound of rain hitting the windshield. At home, I poured myself a whiskey and sat on my balcony, watching the city lights through the rain. 7 years. I had poured everything into this job, sacrificed weekends, relationships, even put off starting a family. For what? To be replaced and offered a patronizing consolation prize? I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I opened my laptop and began typing. Not a resignation letter, not yet. Something else entirely. A plan. By dawn, I had clarity. This wasn't the end of my career. It was just the end of a chapter, and I would write the next one myself. The following morning, I arrived earlier than usual. I wanted to be at my desk before the company-wide announcement hit everyone's inbox. When colleagues stopped by with concerned looks and awkward condolences, I simply smiled and assured them I was fine with the changes. The words tasted bitter, but appearances mattered now more than ever. Morgan came to see me around lunchtime, visibly uncomfortable. We'd always had a good relationship. Weekly lunches, occasional drinks after work, even a few holiday dinners at each other's homes. "I wanted to tell you myself," Morgan said, leaning against my doorframe. "But they asked me not to say anything until it was official." "It's business," I replied, offering the smile I'd been rehearsing since dawn. "You're good at what you do. You'll handle the merge department well." Morgan looked relieved, perhaps expecting anger or resentment. "I hope you'll stay. I meant what I said about wanting you on the team. Your experience is invaluable." I nodded non-committally. "Let's get through the transition first. Have you announced it to the team yet?" The next few days were a strange performance. I attended meetings where my opinion was suddenly less valuable. I watched as Morgan began rearranging the department structure, implementing changes I had suggested months ago, but had been denied the resources to execute. Meanwhile, I documented everything: projects I'd led, client relationships I'd built, processes I'd developed, not for Meridian's benefit, but for mine. During the second week of my transition period, I received an unexpected message from Eduardo, a former client who had moved to a competitor firm. We'd maintained a cordial relationship despite no longer working together. Heard about the changes at Meridian. Any interest in grabbing coffee? We met at a small cafe 3 blocks from my office. Eduardo didn't waste time on pleasantries. I'm going to be straightforward, James. We've been watching Meridian's restructuring with interest. Several of us believe they're making critical mistakes in their market approach. I sipped my coffee, saying nothing. Meridian has been successful because of people like you, people who understand the analytics landscape is changing. Their new direction seems backward-looking. He leaned forward. I have some connections who might be very interested in your perspective on where the industry is actually heading. That conversation planted a seed. Over the next few days, I made several calls to former colleagues who had left Meridian. Each conversation revealed similar sentiments. The company was making decisions based on outdated thinking, prioritizing short-term profits over innovation. The restructuring wasn't just about my department, it was symptomatic of a fundamental misreading of market trends. At home, I began sketching ideas for a new venture, not a direct competitor to Meridian. That would be both legally problematic and unimaginative. Instead, I envisioned a consultancy that filled the gaps Meridian and similar firms were creating in their race to maximize quarterly returns. A business that would partner with forward-thinking clients interested in leveraging analytics for long-term growth rather than quick wins. As my 30-day transition period neared its end, Sandra called me into her office for a final discussion about my new role. She seemed pleased that I had handled the demotion maturely and was ready to outline my new responsibilities. Before we finalize anything, I said calmly, I'd like to propose an alternative arrangement. Her eyebrows raised slightly. I'm listening. Instead of the senior analyst position, I'd like to move into a consultant role. I'll work 3 days a week focusing exclusively on the Peterson account. Peterson was Meridian's largest client, one I had personally brought in and managed for years. Sandra looked surprised. This wasn't what she had expected. That's an unusual request. Why the Peterson account specifically? They trust me. Their team has already expressed concern about the restructuring. Having me stay focused on their business would ease the transition and prevent potential disruption. What I didn't tell her was that maintaining my relationship with Peterson would be invaluable for my future plans. It wasn't about sabotage. I would never compromise my professional integrity. But building my next chapter required maintaining certain connections. After several days of discussions with the executive team, Sandra agreed to my proposal with some modifications. I would remain with Meridian part-time for 3 months, focusing on the Peterson transition. It was perfect, better than I had hoped for. It gave me both the freedom and the runway I needed. That evening I registered a business name, secured a domain, and drafted my first business plan. The humiliation of demotion was transforming into something else. Determination. They thought they were ending my story. They didn't realize they were just giving me a blank page to write something better. My new routine quickly took shape. 3 days at Meridian, maintaining the Peterson account with meticulous care. The other 4 days I worked from my apartment, gradually transforming it into the headquarters of Inside Edge Consulting. I converted my spare bedroom into an office, invested in proper equipment, and began reaching out to my network with carefully crafted messages. Starting something new. Would value your thoughts over coffee sometime. I kept these initial conversations exploratory rather than explicitly seeking business. People are more generous with advice than favors, and these discussions yielded valuable insights about market gaps and client frustrations. More importantly, they kept me visible without raising alarms at Meridian. Eduardo proved particularly helpful, introducing me to investors who specialized in analytics startups. One of them, Vanessa Chen, became a mentor of sorts, challenging my business model and helping refine my approach. Your technical expertise is impressive, she said during our 3rd meeting. But clients won't come to you just for better algorithms. They need to see how you'll solve problems others can't even identify yet. This push led me to define Inside Edge not as a traditional analytics firm, but as a strategic partner helping businesses navigate data complexity. We wouldn't just process numbers, we'd translate them into actionable strategies that aligned with each client's unique challenges. Meanwhile, at Meridian, I watched my former department struggling under its new leadership. Morgan was technically skilled but lacked the relationship-building abilities needed to manage diverse personalities. Team members began leaving, client calls grew tenser, and deadlines slipped. I felt a complicated mix of vindication and genuine sadness seeing something I'd built begin to unravel. The Peterson team noticed these changes too. During one of our regular review meetings, their CMO, Caitlin, pulled me aside. "What's really happening over there, James? The quality of the weekly reports has declined, and we're not getting the strategic guidance we're paying for." I maintained my professionalism. "There are always adjustment periods during restructuring. I'm here to ensure your needs continue to be met. And after your consulting period ends, what then?" I paused, weighing my next words carefully. "Perhaps we should discuss that over dinner sometime." That dinner conversation never explicitly mentioned my new venture, but I shared my perspectives on industry trends and data integration approaches that larger firms often overlooked. 2 weeks later, Caitlin invited me to present these ideas to her executive team, not as a Meridian consultant, but as an independent advisor. The presentation became my soft launch. Without disparaging Meridian, I outlined a vision for analytics that emphasized agility and strategic integration over volume processing. The response was encouraging, with several executives requesting follow-up discussions. As my time at Meridian neared its end, I faced an ethical dilemma. I had built relationships and knowledge there that would undoubtedly benefit Insight Edge. While I'd been careful to avoid directly soliciting Meridian's clients or using proprietary information, the line between professional experience and competitive advantage felt increasingly blurry. I scheduled a meeting with Sandra to be transparent about my plans. She didn't seem surprised. "We suspected you were building something," she said. "Though I admit we thought you'd join a competitor." "I'm not interested in replicating what already exists," I replied. "And I want to be clear, I'm not planning to target Meridian's client base." She nodded, though her skepticism was evident. "Business is business, James. We all do what we need to." Our conversation ended with a surprisingly amicable agreement. I would finish my contract with Meridian, maintaining complete confidentiality about their operations, and they wouldn't pursue legal obstacles to my new venture as long as I adhered to standard non-solicitation principles. On my final day, I cleared out my desk, said goodbye to colleagues, and walked out of the building that had been my professional home for 7 years. The moment felt less dramatic than I'd anticipated. No burning bridges, no movie-worthy exit speech. Just a quiet transition from one chapter to the next. That evening, I finalized my first official contract as Insight Edge, not with Peterson, as I'd initially hoped, but with a smaller company Eduardo had connected me with. The project was modest but presented complex data challenges that perfectly showcased our capabilities. I hired my first employee the following week, Zoe, a brilliant analyst who had left Meridian during the restructuring. She brought not only technical skills but a genuine enthusiasm for our vision. Within a month, we added 2 more team members and moved into a small but proper office space. The early months were punishing. I worked 18-hour days handling everything from client presentations to website maintenance to payroll. Some nights I questioned my decision, wondering if accepting the demotion might have been easier. But then a client would express amazement at insights we'd uncovered, or Zoe would solve a particularly challenging data problem, and I'd remember why I'd taken this path. 6 months in, we reached a milestone I hadn't expected so soon. Peterson called. Not Caitlin directly, but their new data strategy director, who had heard about our work through industry channels. They weren't leaving Meridian entirely, but they wanted to explore a complementary engagement focusing on areas Meridian wasn't addressing. As I prepared for the meeting, I felt no vindictive triumph, no desire to steal the client from my former employer. Instead, I experienced something more powerful, the quiet confidence of knowing I was building something valuable entirely on its own merits. Our meeting with Peterson's team went better than expected. Their new data strategy director, Elise Park, had been brought in specifically to modernize their approach, something Meridian had been resistant to implementing. During our presentation, I could see the recognition in her eyes when we addressed exactly the pain points she'd been struggling with. "What stands out about your approach," Elise said afterward, "is how you're integrating predictive modeling with practical implementation strategies. Most firms give us impressive dashboards but leave the what next entirely to us. We secured a 3-month trial project, targeted enough to prove our value without directly competing with Meridian's broader engagement. The contract wasn't massive, but its strategic importance was immeasurable. Having Peterson's name associated with InsightEdge opened doors that would have otherwise remained firmly shut. Word travels quickly in industry circles. Within weeks, we received inquiries from 2 other major companies. Our team grew to 12 people, necessitating a move to larger offices. Each new hire brought unique perspectives that enhanced our collective expertise. Unlike at Meridian, where departments often operated in isolation, we cultivated a collaborative environment where analysts, developers, and strategists worked side by side. One morning, as I reviewed client proposals, my phone lit up with a message from Morgan. We hadn't spoken since my departure from Meridian. "Could use some perspective from someone who's been there. Coffee sometime?" We met at the same cafe where Eduardo and I had first discussed my venture. Morgan looked exhausted, the confidence I'd always admired now dimmed by obvious stress. "Things are falling apart," Morgan admitted after exchanging pleasantries. "The Peterson team is increasingly dissatisfied. 2 other major accounts are threatening to reduce their engagements, and the board is pressuring Sandra for immediate results." I felt a complex mixture of sympathy and vindication. "What's the root issue in your view?" "The restructuring was based on flawed assumptions. We prioritized efficiency over effectiveness, quantity over quality. They've implemented metrics that incentivize all the wrong behaviors." Morgan hesitated, then added quietly, "They should have listened to you." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked carefully. Morgan stared into an untouched coffee. "I'm considering leaving. Several team members already have. I wanted your honest take. Am I abandoning ship or making a necessary move?" I considered my response thoughtfully. A year ago, I might have encouraged the departure out of resentment. Now my perspective had evolved. The question isn't whether leaving is right or wrong. It's whether staying aligns with your professional values and growth. Only you can answer that. We talked for nearly 2 hours. I offered advice on navigating corporate transitions without burning bridges regardless of the decision. As we parted, Morgan thanked me with unexpected emotion. "You could have been bitter. Most people would be." I smiled genuinely. Bitterness is exhausting. Building something new takes all my energy. The following week, I received an industry analysis report that featured InsightEdge as an emerging disruptor in the analytics space. The article highlighted our integrated approach and noted our rapid growth. More surprisingly, it mentioned Meridian's declining market position, citing internal restructuring and talent exodus as contributing factors. That same day, Eduardo called with news that changed everything. Novatech is looking for a strategic analytics partner for their AI integration initiative. 2-year contract minimum, potentially 8 figures. They've shortlisted 3 firms, including yours. Novatech was the industry giant, a client Meridian had unsuccessfully pursued for years. Being on their shortlist, especially as a new company, was unprecedented. The selection process would be grueling. Capability demonstrations, security assessments, and multiple presentation rounds. "Why us?" I asked bluntly. "We're barely a year old." "Their CTO attended that conference where you spoke last month. Your perspective on predictive analytics and supply chain management apparently resonated. Plus, they're explicitly looking for fresh approaches." We poured everything into the Novatech proposal. The entire team worked weekends, developing custom models demonstrating our capabilities with their publicly available data. The final presentation deck underwent 17 revisions. When we submitted our materials ahead of the deadline, exhaustion mingled with cautious hope. 2 weeks later, we received notification that we'd advanced to the final round, one of only 2 remaining candidates. The other finalist wasn't Meridian, as I'd half expected, but a well-established international firm with offices in 12 countries. The contrast couldn't have been starker, their 100-person analytics division against our team of 16. The night before our final presentation, I gathered everyone in our office. The walls were covered with diagrams, analytics models, and implementation flowcharts, the culmination of our collective expertise. Tomorrow isn't about winning or losing, I told them. It's about demonstrating who we actually are. We're not trying to be the biggest. We're trying to be the most insightful. One of our newest team members, previously from a major competitor, spoke up. I've been through dozens of these pitches at my old firm. The difference here is we're not promising capabilities we don't have, or overselling what we can deliver. That's rare. Her words crystallized something I hadn't fully articulated until that moment. Our advantage wasn't just technical skill or innovative methodology, it was integrity. We'd built our approach around understanding clients' actual needs rather than imposing predetermined solutions. That clarity carried us into the presentation room the next morning with a confidence that felt natural rather than performative. The Novatech executives were impressively thorough, challenging assumptions and testing the depth of our expertise. When their CTO asked about implementation timelines, I gave an answer that might have seemed counter-strategic in a typical sales situation. Honestly, the standard 6-week integration period most firms promise is unrealistic for something this complex. We'd recommend a phased approach over 12 weeks with capability benchmarks at each stage. There was a moment of silence. Then the CTO smiled. That's the first realistic timeline we've heard. As we packed up our materials afterward, their head of procurement approached me privately. Your former employer pitched us 3 times over the past 2 years. Always impressive presentations, but something was missing. She glanced toward her colleagues. What you showed today wasn't just analytics capability, it was understanding. We didn't celebrate prematurely. The decision was still pending, and the competing firm had decades of experience and hundreds of successful implementations to their credit. Whatever the outcome, we had established ourselves as legitimate contenders in a space where reputation typically took years to build. Driving home that evening, I passed Meridian's building. The lights were still on, figures visible behind glass walls, likely preparing for their own critical presentations and client meetings. For the first time, I felt no lingering resentment, just an appreciation for the journey that had brought me here. Sometimes the greatest catalyst for growth is being forced to start again. The Novatech contract landed in our inbox on a rainy Tuesday morning. We had won. The team gathered around as I projected the email onto our conference room wall, the momentary silence quickly erupting into cheers. This wasn't just a business milestone, it was validation of everything we had built from scratch. The celebration lasted exactly 1 day before reality set in. Delivering on a contract of this magnitude would require significant expansion. We needed to hire specialized talent, establish more robust infrastructure, and implement formal processes while somehow maintaining the agile, collaborative culture that had become our signature strength. Office space, equipment procurement, security protocols, onboarding systems, each required immediate attention. I found myself working until midnight most evenings, oscillating between strategic decisions and minute operational details. Then came an unexpected complication. Morgan called, sounding hesitant but determined. I've given notice at Meridian. Several others from the team are leaving too. A pause. We were wondering if Inside Edge might have opportunities. The request created an immediate ethical dilemma. Morgan was undeniably talented, and the team members in question were among Meridian's best remaining analysts. But hiring them would appear predatory, potentially damaging our reputation and relationship with other firms in the industry. It's not that simple, I replied carefully. There are professional considerations, non-compete clauses. Those aren't enforceable in this state, and you know it, Morgan interrupted. Look, we're leaving regardless. The question is where we go next. I promised to consider the situation and consult with our legal advisors. The conversation haunted me for days. During a late dinner with Vanessa, who had transitioned from mentor to formal advisor for Inside Edge, I outlined the predicament. You're overthinking this, she said bluntly. Talent moves around in this industry constantly. As long as you're not actively poaching or encouraging contract violations, hiring former Meridian employees isn't just acceptable, It's standard practice. It feels personal, I admitted, like I'm dismantling what I used to build. Vanessa studied me for a moment. Is that what's really bothering you? Or is it that hiring them makes this less about your personal redemption story and more about a collective exodus from a sinking ship? Her question struck uncomfortably close to truth. Part of me had embraced the narrative of the underdog building something from nothing. Bringing in Morgan and others would complicate that story, suggesting Insight Edge's success was partially built on Meridian's failures rather than entirely on our own merit. After much deliberation, I reached a decision that felt both professionally and personally sound. I called Morgan with specific terms. We would consider applications from former Meridian employees after they had been officially separated for at least 30 days, and we would not discuss sensitive information about either Meridian's operations or our own Novatech engagement during the interview process. With hiring underway and implementation plans developing for Novatech, another unexpected situation emerged. The Peterson account, our first major client and the bridge between my past and present, reached out with an urgent request. Their executive team wanted a comprehensive analytics overhaul, effectively consolidating services currently split between Meridian and Insight Edge. The opportunity was substantial but fraught with complications. Taking over Meridian's portion of the work would be seen as directly competitive, potentially triggering legal scrutiny over non-solicitation agreements. More importantly, it would require resources we had already allocated to Novatech's implementation. During an emergency leadership meeting, opinions divided sharply. Some argued we should seize the opportunity to fully secure Peterson as a cornerstone client. Others worried about overextension and potential reputation damage. Zoe, typically the most measured voice in our discussions, offered the perspective that ultimately guided our decision. We've built trust with Peterson by being honest about our capabilities and limitations. That shouldn't change now because the stakes are higher. The next day I met with Caitlin and Elise from Peterson. Instead of immediately accepting their proposal, I presented an alternative, a phased transition that would allow us to maintain quality standards while respecting prior commitments. We would gradually assume additional responsibilities over 6 months rather than immediately displacing Meridian. This isn't what I expected, Caitlin admitted. Most firms would jump at the chance to take the entire account. We're more interested in sustainable relationships than quick wins, I replied. Promising more than we can reliably deliver right now would undermine everything we've built together. To my surprise, they preferred our measured approach. The phased plan was approved within a week, with explicit agreement that Peterson would manage the transition communication with Meridian. These developments precipitated our most significant organizational evolution yet. We formalized our company structure, established a proper leadership team, and developed clear growth objectives. The small consultancy born from professional disappointment was transforming into a substantial enterprise with increasingly complex responsibilities. Throughout this period, I rarely thought about Meridian or the circumstances that had led to my departure. The intensity of our current challenges left little mental space for dwelling on the past. Then one evening, as I was leaving our office building, I literally collided with Sandra in the lobby. She was visiting another company in the same complex. The momentary awkwardness gave way to surprisingly genuine pleasantries. We exchanged brief updates on personal matters, her daughter's college graduation, my recent move to a new apartment downtown. Then she mentioned something unexpected. I'm leaving Meridian next month, taking some time before deciding what's next. The news shouldn't have affected me, but somehow it did. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, meaning it. She smiled wryly. Don't be. The changes you predicted in your final presentations are happening exactly as you outlined. The board has finally recognized the strategic missteps, but correction will take time. She hesitated before adding, You were right, James, about all of it. We parted with cordial goodbyes, but her words stayed with me. The vindication felt hollow, not because it wasn't deserved, but because my focus had fundamentally shifted. Success, I was learning, wasn't about proving others wrong. It was about continuously proving yourself right through consistent action and adaptation. That night, reviewing our Novatech implementation timeline, I realized something significant had changed in my professional identity. I no longer defined myself in relation to Meridian or my past role there. Insight Edge wasn't a response to rejection. It had become its own story, with challenges and triumphs entirely its own. As we prepared for our first major implementation phase with Novatech, I gathered our expanded team, now 32 people, including several I had never imagined working alongside again. Looking at their expectant faces, I felt the weight of a different kind of responsibility than I'd ever experienced at Meridian. This wasn't about maintaining something established or navigating corporate politics. This was about fulfilling the promise of something we were all creating together. The first year of the Novatech contract tested every aspect of our organization. Their systems were more complex than initially apparent, requiring custom solutions we hadn't anticipated. Several key milestones slipped, creating tense conversations and requiring weekend work from our implementation team. There were moments when I questioned whether we had overreached, taking on more than our growing company could handle. What saved us wasn't technical brilliance or heroic effort, though both were present. It was the transparency we maintained throughout the process. When challenges emerged, we communicated them immediately rather than hiding difficulties until they became crises. When we needed to adjust timelines, we provided detailed reasoning with alternative approaches. This candor initially surprised Novatech executives, who were accustomed to vendors over-promising and deflecting accountability. Most partners spend more energy managing perceptions than solving problems, their CTO commented during a particularly difficult review meeting. At least with Insight Edge, we always know where we stand. Gradually, the implementation stabilized. Our team developed innovative solutions to data integration problems that had stymied previous attempts. By the 18-month mark, Novatech's analytics capabilities had transformed, providing actionable insights that measurably improved operational efficiency. What had begun as a challenging client relationship evolved into a genuine partnership. Meanwhile, our work with Peterson expanded according to the phased plan we'd established. By the final transition stage, Meridian had voluntarily withdrawn from the remaining portions of the account, concentrating their resources elsewhere. I learned through industry channels that they were undergoing extensive reorganization, following several quarters of declining performance. Our company continued growing steadily. We added specialized divisions, established a formal research arm, and opened a second office in Toronto to better serve international clients. The leadership team expanded beyond the founding group, bringing fresh perspectives and expertise from diverse industry backgrounds. The business press began featuring Insight Edge in articles about industry disruption and entrepreneurial success. One profile in a leading business magazine described our rise as a textbook example of identifying market gaps and executing with precision. The story mentioned my departure from Meridian only in passing, focusing instead on our innovative methodologies and client outcomes. These external validations were gratifying, but the internal evolution of the company brought deeper satisfaction. We had built something with its own identity and momentum, something that no longer needed the origin story of professional disappointment to justify its existence. Throughout this growth period, I maintained occasional contact with former Meridian colleagues, including those who had joined Insight Edge and others who had moved to different organizations. These conversations provided valuable industry intelligence, but also something more personal, a sense of continuity in professional relationships despite organizational changes. One evening, after a particularly successful client presentation, I received an unexpected email from Meridian's new CEO, Robert Chen. I recognized his name from industry news but had never met him personally. I'd appreciate the opportunity to discuss a matter of mutual interest. Perhaps breakfast next week? My curiosity outweighed my hesitation. We met at an upscale hotel restaurant, exchanging pleasantries before he addressed the purpose of our meeting. Meridian is repositioning, he explained, his manner straightforward and unembellished. The board has acknowledged strategic missteps over the past few years and is committed to corrective action. I nodded, waiting for him to continue. We've been analyzing successful competitors, particularly those demonstrating innovation in analytics integration. Insight Edge consistently appears at the top of that analysis. He paused. I'm here to discuss potential collaboration options, including the possibility of acquisition. The proposal was so unexpected that I momentarily struggled to maintain my composure. Meridian wanted to acquire the company born from their decision to demote me. The irony was almost too perfect. "What exactly are you envisioning?" I asked carefully. He outlined an acquisition framework that would preserve Insight Edge as a distinct division within Meridian, with retention packages for key personnel, including a senior executive role for me reporting directly to him. The financial terms were substantial, reflecting our company's market value and growth trajectory. "Why not build these capabilities internally?" I asked. "Meridian certainly has the resources." "Time," he replied simply. "Markets move too quickly now. What you've built would take years to replicate, even with unlimited resources." I promised to consider the proposal and discuss it with our leadership team and investors. As we parted, he added one final comment. "For what it's worth, the board recognizes that Meridian made a significant error in judgment regarding your role years ago. This isn't about correcting that specific mistake, but it does acknowledge the value you've created since then." The acquisition discussion dominated the next several weeks. Our leadership team had divided opinions. Some saw the financial opportunity and strategic advantages of joining a larger organization with established global infrastructure. Others worried about cultural preservation and autonomy. Vanessa, ever practical, emphasized that such offers rarely came at perfect moments. The question was whether this particular opportunity aligned with our long-term objectives. I found myself in a position I never anticipated, having to decide whether to rejoin, albeit under vastly different circumstances, the organization that had once deemed my leadership dispensable. The symmetry was not lost on me, nor on the original team members who had been with Insight Edge from the beginning. During a private conversation with Zoe, who had become both a trusted colleague and friend, I admitted my conflicted feelings. "Part of me wants to decline purely on principle," I confessed, "to prove we can continue succeeding independently." "Is that about what's best for the company or about personal vindication?" she asked, echoing Vanessa's question from years earlier. After extensive due diligence and negotiation, we reached a decision. We would proceed with the acquisition, but with specific conditions: guaranteed operational independence for 3 years, retained decision-making authority over our client relationships, and protected positions for our entire team. Most importantly, Insight Edge would maintain its separate brand identity and methodological approach. The day the agreement was finalized, I gathered our entire company, now over 70 people across 2 offices, for a video conference. Many faces showed concern or uncertainty about our future. This partnership, I emphasized, deliberately avoiding the word acquisition, doesn't represent an ending. It provides infrastructure and resources to pursue opportunities we've had to decline due to capacity constraints. Our mission and methods remain unchanged. The transition proceeded more smoothly than I had dared hope. Robert proved to be a hands-off executive sponsor, focusing on strategic alignment while respecting our operational independence. Meridian's global presence opened doors previously beyond our reach, particularly in European and Asian markets. Our team expanded methodically, integrating select Meridian specialists who shared our philosophy. 6 months after the acquisition, I found myself back in the Meridian headquarters building for a global leadership summit. Walking through the familiar lobby brought a strange sense of déjà vu. The security guard recognized me, greeting me by name with mild surprise. The elevators were the same, but the executive floor had been completely redesigned. Sleeker, more modern, symbolizing the organization's attempted reinvention. During a break between sessions, I wandered to the window overlooking the city. In the reflection, I noticed Sandra approaching. She had returned to Meridian as a senior advisor after Robert took over. "How does it feel to be back?" she asked, standing beside me. I considered the question carefully. Familiar and completely different simultaneously. She nodded. "You've changed this place more than you realize. Not just through the acquisition, but through the ripple effects of your departure." It forced some difficult but necessary questions. We chatted briefly about the ongoing integration efforts before she mentioned something unexpected. "I remember that lunch when we discussed your transition out of the department head role. You were so composed, so strategic. I suspected you had something planned, but I never imagined this outcome." I smiled, recalling my carefully maintained facade during that period. Neither did I, honestly. I just knew I needed to build something that reflected my vision. whether Meridian valued it or not. As the summit concluded, Robert announced the formation of a new innovation council that would guide the company's strategic direction. He named me as one of 7 council members, effectively placing me in a position to influence the very organization that had once sidelined me. The appointment brought no sense of triumph or vindication, only the recognition of how completely the narrative had transformed. This wasn't about reclaiming something lost or proving someone wrong. It was about creating value recognized on its own merits, regardless of history. Later that evening, at a reception for summit participants, I found myself surrounded by a mix of longtime Meridian executives and newer leaders from acquired companies. One of the executives, after several drinks, made a comment that would have once bothered me deeply. "It's ironic, isn't it? You had to leave to become valuable enough to bring back." Before I could respond, Zoe, who had attended the summit as part of our leadership team, interjected smoothly. "I think it's more accurate to say that value exists independently of recognition. James built something remarkable because that's what he does, whether at Meridian, at Insight Edge, or now in this new chapter." Her words crystallized something I had been gradually understanding throughout this journey. Professional worth isn't defined by organizational validation or title or even compensation. It's demonstrated through consistent creation of value, through resilience in the face of setbacks, and through the willingness to rebuild when necessary. As I looked around the room at the blended teams, people who had once been on opposite sides of a corporate divide now working toward shared objectives, I realized that the most significant transformation hadn't been organizational at all. It had been personal. The journey from department head to entrepreneur to executive had changed me far more profoundly than it had changed either company. The true victory wasn't returning to Meridian under better circumstances. It was discovering that I no longer needed external validation to recognize my own capabilities. The smile I now carried wasn't about winning some protracted corporate game. It was the quiet confidence of someone who had discovered their own resilience. Someone who understood that sometimes the most powerful response to rejection isn't anger or vindication, it's creation.